We've all had those plants that just we simply can't keep happy. Is it because of their care? Is it because whatever we do, we're just not going to be able to keep them happy? Stick around with me and I will tell you about some of my dearly departed houseplants, what I've learned from this process, and would I be trying them again in the future? Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, this video is not all doom and gloom, it's not just going to be plants that haven't survived in my care and woe is me, but it's going to be more about what I've learned and would I repurchase these plants if I had a choice? I have done another video, consider that like a part 1 and this is a part 2. You don't need to have seen the first video to be able to appreciate this one, but if you do want to watch that first video at some point, I will link it somewhere at the top of the screen. So without further ado, let's have a look at the first one. Failed attempt is whatever has survived the 2 first attempts of the same exact plant. So if that makes sense, I haven't bought 3 different Anthurium luxuriances. It died off once, I kind of propagated it, tried it again, didn't work, propagated whatever was left of that, and this was the 3rd attempt. So I went from a relatively established plant because I was able to keep it happy. And this was the interesting thing. I bought it 2 years ago from Grow Tropicals at the Malvern Spring Festival, the first Malvern Spring Festival that I went to and had a talk at. And I was super excited about it. I bought it back home. I think it was then when I bought it. I'm pretty sure it was. Either then or just before them online with Grow Tropicals. Can't remember 100%. But it was a plant that was doing really, really well. And I bought it, for the people that are aware of Malvern Spring Festival, it happens in the spring. So it happened in the kind of beginnings of the growing season and survived all of the growing season. Grew like a dream. Roll over winter. And to be fair, the second time taught me a bit more that when you come to dealing with this plant in the winter, at least in my experience, it really does not like an awful lot of water. This is one of the anthuriums that I have found, and again, I can't talk from like as an expert on this, not that I'm an expert in any plant, but as I've just said, I've killed this plant 3 times now. So this is what I've experienced and what I've learned, I think, so far with this. Is it doesn't need an awful lot of water in the winter, which is true for a lot of anthuriums, but this one specifically, I wouldn't treat it quite like a cactus and not water it at all during the winter, but I would treat it more like a succulent during the winter. And when I did that, it did a bit better. Now, quite why it failed the 3rd time, I don't know. Now, the million-dollar question is, would I try this plant again? Probably not. Probably not. I think 3 taps and I'm out with this one. It might have been that I just needed a different plant. There's a lot of chatter around, and it has been for a while, of whether or not a specific plant might just not want to succeed and other ones might do better. I don't know. I think there was a very interesting comment from somebody on a previous video that was talking about almost kind of this notion of, and I don't know whether there's any scientific basis in this, but kind of like care memory. So I think this person was saying there's a plant that was used to low light, but at some point after a while it started having issues, and then when this plant was moved to better light, yes, it improved its conditions, but it was still experiencing the same issues. So there was kind of a hangover from what had happened. So it's very interesting as a kind of topic. As I said, I don't know if there's any scientific validity to this, but it's an interesting topic to consider. But yes, the luxurians sadly won't be retrying again. I have got a hybrid which is the luxurians crossed with the radicans, and that one seems to be doing okay. That one threw a wobbly recently, lost care memory. So I think this person was saying there's a plant that was used to low light, but at some point after a while it started having issues, and then when this plant was moved to better light, yes, it improved its conditions, but it was still experiencing the same issues. So there was kind of a hangover from what had happened. So it's very interesting as a kind of topic. As I said, I don't know if there's any scientific validity to this, but it's an interesting topic to consider. But yes, the luxurians sadly won't be retrying again. I have got a hybrid which is the luxurians crossed with the radicans, and that one seems to be doing okay. That one threw a wobbly recently, lost about half of his leaves, but it's bouncing back a bit better than just the luxurians would have done. Now, and this one saddens me a lot to say, I do have the last bit of the mother plant surviving, and surviving is the best word I can use to describe it. This is my Begonia sizemoreae, Chewbacca. So Chewbacca 2.0, or Chewbacca's child, perished, I want to say this summer. It was kind of like, it wasn't getting the best care. I don't think it's to do with the plant, because both Chewie and Chewbacca's kids, both the original Begonia sizemoreae and the propagation from it, have been in my collection in one form or another for nearly 5 years now. So for a begonia, that is spectacular. And as I said, the mother plant, it's still got a few leaves, not doing great, but at the same time, I'm not giving it the care that it needs because it just looks a bit busted at this point. And it's also a plant that I know, even though it's not that easy to find and you don't find it everywhere all the time, it's still not very difficult to find. So that's the kind of big thing with this. I gave up on this plant a bit, which is unfair. So the reality is the mother plant might be one. I'm trying to be a bit more brutal this winter, and plants that have been on the struggle bus for over a year, this one has, are just going to end up in the compost bin just because I need less plants. In an ideal world, is so that I don't get more plants and I just have less things to water and care for. In the reality is I'll probably just get a plant to replace it, but we shall see how we get on there. But it is one of those things that, for me, it was a me failure. So the ultimate question here is, would I repurchase it? Yes, 100%. And if I do find a kind of established version of it, or just the kind of size that you would get a bit more of a lush plant in a garden centre plant store online, I would 100% repurchase the Begonia sizemoreae. It brings me so much joy. It's got a slight iridescence on its leaves and people don't really talk about it. It goes slightly blue in the right light, and the fuzziness. It's my original hairy plant, and for that I would always want it to be in my collection. So yes, 100% would repurchases, and I'm hoping if it's a more established and happier looking plant, it doesn't look quite so busted, I will take the time to keep it happy as much as possible. So the next one is an interesting one. It's a Dischidia oiantha or oiantha. I'll put the name somewhere on the screen, and I think I had the variegated form as well. And a lot of people don't generally talk about Dischidias quite so much. If I'm not mistaken, they are closely, or if not closely, they are definitely related to Hoyas, and they have very similar growth patterns. And I had one that was a bit more interesting. I think it was the Dischidia that looks the watermelon Dischidia, I think. Couldn't keep that one happy. I say I couldn't keep this one happy. No, I couldn't keep it 100% happy. This plant was in one form or another, it has been in my collection. And the other type of form that it's been in, it was clinging on for dear life. I thought I'd got rid of it. I'm looking at it now. Is that still surviving? There are 3 measly leaves on it, and the rest of it has died off. I literally thought I'd got rid of that this summer because I'm just like, it's not doing anything, it's dying, it's taking up space. I have not watered that plant the whole of summer and the whole of spring and even now. So that plant has been bone dry 6 months, I'd say. It's got leaves, they're not looking great. But yes, so this is one that, again, it was a case of, it's not that the plant was bad, and I know that some people struggle with Dischidias, and as I said, I've struggled a bit with a couple of Dischidias. Interestingly, this plant that was sold to me as a Hoya China beans, very much so, as everybody said, have a look at the blooms and see if it's a Dischidia, because it's more than likely a Dischidia. It is, and this one's doing a lot better. It's not super happy, but it's not looking quite as busted as it did in the past. This I have got mounted, and I have got mounted. It doesn't need, from what I've seen, because it's an epiphytic one, it needs to be as airy as possible. So ironically enough, this is in a cactus soil mix on a mount, and it's doing super well. super, super well. It never did this well when it was in just a regular pot with regular kind of tropical houseplant mix, essentially. So coming back to the original plant that I'm talking about, the Dischidia oiantha, which I thought I'd got rid of, but apparently it's still here. It's not a case of it's a difficult plant. I found that I had it in a cactus soil mix, I had it in a terracotta pot, it was doing fine. It doesn't have particularly fussy light requirements. It does prefer the bright indirect light. But for me, and this was the case always with this plant, because again, I got it at the beginning of my plant journey. I probably had that plant 4 or 5 years. It never excited me really. It was at the very beginning of my collection. I know we've all been there, where there's a point where you just thought, I must buy every plant that I find in front of me. So I got better at not doing that anymore, or not to the same degree. Would I try it again? Probably not, because it still doesn't excite me. It never excited me. And it's not a difficult plant. As I said, it's still got some green leaves that are not dead. They're probably quite desiccated at this point, but they're still on there. They look like they're fine. But for me, it's a pass. It's a pass just because it's not interesting, not because it's a difficult plant. I think if you want a relatively non-offensive, green and white variegated plant that's not going to be particularly troublesome. I don't think it particularly had an awful lot of mealybugs or even pests, because anybody that's grown Hoyas knows that mealybugs are a real problem. But fine, fine. It just doesn't excite me. This one excites me a bit more because the leaves, the foliage is a bit more interesting. It's got that, the kind of blooms a nice kind of pinkish color, but the oiantha or onantha, not for me. Oh, and let's stick onto the Hoya train, shall we? This is a plant that, spoiler, very beginning of me describing this plant, I'm going to tell you whether or not I would buy it. 100%, I just need to find it again. So the Hoya imperialis, stunning plant, and I don't know whether or not, it's not visible at the moment because obviously it's winter, so I've got my arms covered, but it's actually also, the bloom of this plant is tattooed on my arm. That much love that I had for this plant. It's not a particularly striking, like the image that I've got for my plant care app is not particularly striking. If I've got an image of the blooms, which I hope I do have, I will put it here. But relatively kind of basic green leaves for a Hoya, quite large, quite thick as well. It grew like mad for me when it was happy. It took about a year and a half before it started blooming, I think. And the leaves, as I said, nothing, it's not an exciting foliage Hoya. I will say that. This is one that you will definitely be buying for the blooms. It is imposing. It is a very large plant. It's one of the biggest Hoyas that I've ever experienced. And that was part of the problem why it didn't survive, because it was climbing up things. And when I redid the conservatory and kind of, I've got a video of like when I first came into the new conservatory after it was done, and I'll link it somewhere at the top. But that one didn't make that transition, and it's a shame. Because the blooms are very cool. There's not an awful lot of Hoyas, large flowered Hoyas, that you can grow relatively happily in a household condition. This is one that, keep in mind, it's not always grown in here. It also bloomed when I had it in household conditions as well. It just needs an awful lot of light, like most Hoyas, to be fair. But the cluster of blooms is kind of large. Like the picture, even if I find a picture of the bloom, you'll just think that I've zoomed in a lot. But each one of those little blooms that you get on kind of Hoya peduncles, and there's usually quite a few of them, and it's usually like a golf bowl size kind of like massive blooms. You don't get quite as many on each peduncle with this one, or at least I never did. But each one of the blooms was probably about the circumference of the whole peduncle on other ones. So it is very impressive. And it also bloomed prolifically for me. What I was growing this in, I think, was just a random kind of my own kind of aroid soil mix and terracotta, if I'm not mistaken. And it loved life. The reason why I would want to retry this, and I would want to retry it in a different space, is I need somewhere where it can kind of climb and just take over everything. This will be one of those vining plants for me. Did it have mealybugs like most Hoyas? Yes. Was it massively manageable because the plant was so stinking huge? 100%. Like, I don't know anybody if they've experienced this, or maybe it's just me, with my smaller leaved Hoyas, the smaller, more diminutive Hoyas. I think when they start getting pests, especially mealybugs, it can really do some damage. With the bigger kind of Hoyas, or even Hoyas that are absolutely kind of more mature and they've got loads of leaves and kind of foliages, there's more obviously places for the mealybugs to be, but they can handle a pest infestation much better than a much smaller Hoya. And this was no difference for the imperialis. It did completely fine with the pests. I just needed to keep on top of it, but it's fine because, again, because this is not weird shaped leaves, it's not tiny leaves, it's a lot easier to kind of see the pests and deal with them quite quickly. So 100% would repurchase the Hoya imperialis. Let's keep on blooming plant kind of topics here. So my Medinilla magnifica, I'll put a picture here. I think that's how you pronounce that. Was it the Filipino orchid or something like that? Beautiful plant, and I think some of you might be surprised that I don't still have it. A couple of things I have to say about this, why it's no longer in my care. So it hadn't died, it wasn't massively happy, but it hadn't died. But the way that it grew after a while. So this is a plant that is exceptionally impressive when you first get it, especially if you're buying it from a plant store or a garden center. I got it from a garden center, and it's beautiful. Like, it's got the blooms. This is one of the few plants that I had in my bedroom window, so people can kind of see it walking down the road in front of the house. And this was the one plant that I've had 3, if not 4, random strangers stop me whilst I was coming into my own house to ask me, what is that plant in the window? It looks amazing. So it's definitely a bit of an eye-catching plant. Those blooms, which technically are, I think, are bracts, and the blooms are the smaller bits, but there's a few things that I want to say about the blooms. Firstly, the actual tiny little blooms drop all the time. So you're constantly picking up blooms. They can go moldy, all of these things. I think there's a tiny bit of nectar that comes off the back of them, like some of the Hoyas that are very kind of drippy, if that makes sense. And then the bloom, the whole bract will drop. It does stay on there for a long time, so you do get that pop of color for a long period of time. But this is a plant that's very exacting on its care needs, and I think I should have repotted it into a bigger pot and it would have been fine. But the problem is, the moment it gets stressed, like most plants, it will drop the bottom leaves. And then eventually what you end up is this very corky looking bottom of the stems, and then just some pompony green leaves at the top. It just doesn't look great. And for people that have been here on my channel for long enough, I am not one to poo-poo on a plant for aesthetic reasons. Plants looking a bit, and I've said this for a lot of the plants in this video, that they were a bit busted there, so I didn't like them. But by and large, a plant that looks okay, but just doesn't grow greatly in terms of like its kind of growth habit, isn't something that I generally mind. I don't mind the kooky weird plants. This is one that didn't stick with me well. It just looked odd. Odd in not a good way, for me at least. And as I said, this isn't to bash any of these plants. I don't know if I've said that. This isn't to bash any of these plants. I'm just giving you my experiences. We can 100% disagree, and this is not me trying to offend anybody that any of these plants are their favorite plants. It just didn't work for me. So I'm just talking through my experiences with mine. But yeah, this is one that I don't think I'm going to be repurchasing again, which is a shame, because I thought when I owned it in the beginning, and I'm just like, oh, if this ever dies, I am definitely replacing it. And I can't understand how more people don't have it. I kind of understand that now. Kind of understand that now. It's also a plant that needs a lot of space. It's a wide plant. It doesn't grow very tall very quickly, but it's a wide plant. It's got exacting needs in terms of its care. It does need to kind of dry out relatively well before you rewater it. It's got very fine roots, not quite as fine as begonias, but not far off. But it's almost got similar care needs, and I understand why they call it a Filipino orchid. I'm assuming the Filipino would be because it's from the Philippines or around that region of the world. But this is one that kind of almost would like to be in pure bark, but at the same time it doesn't like to dry out that much like an orchid, because obviously the roots aren't quite as thick as orchid roots. So it's a weird one, and I kind of get why this isn't more common, if that makes sense. You can still find it, at least here in the UK, at least here where I live. It comes up about once or twice a year. But yeah, this is one that I don't think I'm going to be trying again. It's a shame, because I did enjoy growing this plant. Let's end on a bang, and I don't think I went through this on my previous video. Apologies if I have done. Or to be fair, you probably won't see this section because I'll probably just edit it out if I'm just repeating myself from a previous video. But anyway, let's end on a philodendron. So Philodendron Florida Ghost. And again, this is a plant that I had, and I still have got cuttings from it. It used to be here, and it kept dropping on things. People that have been here recently have heard me talk about it, and they're probably not seeing it anymore in the background. It was behind the Ismaildens there. This is a plant that I probably got about 4 years ago, maybe 5 at this point. No, I think 4. All of the plants that I said before I had for 5 years, because again, COVID. Does anybody else have this with COVID, that it's almost like a black hole of time that you just don't count it? Because the plants that I was saying I had for 5 years, I probably had for 6 or 7 years in the reality, because I bought them way before COVID, but COVID just never happened. The pandemic never happened, because I think it's because we were all stuck at home for so long. So this is a plant that I've definitely had 4 or 5 years, because I bought it in the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. And it was one that I think me and everybody else kind of really got exposed to it by Kaylee Ellen back then on her channel. And I loved it. Loved that plant when I was growing it. It was great. I was in a different house at that point, which ironically enough, it was just by a window, but it was keeping, I never had the mint leaves. I always used to get the really, really bright, kind of creamy white leaves, and they would stay forever like that. A lot of the time, some of those leaves never even went down to green. It was insane. And I'm just like, how are you surviving and how are you thriving? It grew like the clappers. And then I came in here, and every other plant is loving the bright indirect light that it was getting in here. That plant started giving me the mint leaves. And that was immediately almost the time when I started losing a bit of love for this plant, because I'm just like, your one thing was the white leaves. And I know it's a light level thing. I know we've all discussed this to death online. It is a light level thing. It obviously wasn't getting the light levels in here, but I didn't have anywhere else to put it. And but other than that, the plant was happy, healthy, doing okay. It got pests quite a few times, dealt with the pests. It never, like, it was a robust philodendron. It was a philodendron that didn't really cause a lot of issues. And in the reality, and I don't know if I've done a review on this plant, I'll put it somewhere if I have, but the score would be relatively high that I would give this plant in terms of a review, because by and large it's a quite a solid, stable plant without too many issues, at least in my experience. Now, would I repurchase this plant specifically? Possibly I would repurchase this if I kind of eventually move to that new location and I've got different lighting conditions. This might even be a plant that it 100% does not need to be in here in terms of humidity. It could easily be in household humidity, and I would probably do that, and I would probably put it quite close to a south-facing window, maybe with a net curtain in front of it, and it would do absolutely fine. It would still get that white creaminess. Would I put it maybe on a moss pole this time around? Yes, because I never did, and it was always a bit untidy. But I would repurchase it under the right conditions. Not to say that this is not a fantastic plant, and I know there's still an awful lot of fans of this plant out there, and I 100% understand and agree. I just lost a bit of that interest with the mintiness. And again, it was a light level, it was a care issue, I understand that. But it also became one of those things that I'm just like, you had the one thing and so yeah, it's a probably would again under the right conditions. But yes, this was the part 2 of the plants that are no longer with me, and they are dearly departed, except for that one random Dischidia which is behind there that I do need to get rid of. What did you think? Did any of these surprise you? Again, are any of these your favorites? Do you disagree with me vehemently? By all means, you are completely valid in your opinion. These have just been my experiences. Do, however, let us all know, and me down below, politely, please. No need to get like aggressive in the comments. But yeah, do let me know down below what your experiences have been with these plants, or if you want to share some of the plants that are no longer with you, and would you repurchase them, would you not, and maybe the reasons why. I'd be really, really curious. As I said, I think last time that I did this video, a lot of people found it quite interesting and they wanted a part 2. Let me know again if you want another part. If you want a part 3, I've got a long list of this. My plant care app lets me archive plants now that are no longer with me, so it's a lot easier for me to remember this. I haven't done this as much in the past because I've gone through so many different plants and plant deaths over the last 6 or 7 years that I've kind of lost track of what I had and what's died and all of these things. At least now with my plant care app, I go, oh yes, that's no longer with me. And I remember why it's no longer with me. That bit I remember. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.